Excuse me, everyone. We now have all of our speakers in conference. Please be aware that each of your lines is in a listen-only mode. At the conclusion of today's presentation, we will open the floor for questions via the Adobe chat platform. I would now like to turn the conference over to Mr. Chris Hund. Mr. Hund, you may begin.
Thank you, Chelsea. Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? This is Chris Hund, Director for Clinical Quality at the American Hospital Association with the group called the Health Research and Educational Trust, or HRET. Thank you very much for joining us today for the monthly TeamSTEPPS webinar. Today's webinar is how to introduce TeamSTEPPS in small and rural hospitals, the yellow brick road of teamwork. So just before we get into things today, just some rules of engagement to help you out and help everybody have an enjoyable experience. You could listen to the audio for this webinar in two different ways. You can listen to it through your phone and dial in the number that was with the invitation. If you do that, you're going to want to mute your computer speakers. So you can go up to the top of the screen you're looking at right now, and there's a little speaker, and you can click on that guy and mute it there, or just overall mute your computer speakers as you normally would. You could also listen through your computer, and that also is a viable option. So if you're trying to do that, of course, then you don't have to worry about the phone. We're going to do a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And the way we do that is we do a moderated Q&A session where I'll be talking with our speaker, Ken Alexander, and I'll be asking him all the questions. How we try to run this is, if you look at the chat bar that's on the right-hand side of your screen right now, just chat in questions as we go along. I'll be looking at those questions, and I'll try to put the questions in a nice order. A lot of times questions have some sort of thematic connection, so I'll try to put that together so we have a good kind of easy conversation at the end with Ken. If you have questions that are more logistical in nature, like I'm having trouble calling in, or where are these slides going to be posted after the presentation, anything like that, that's where you would go over and you would type that into the chat bar over there. So just two ways that you can do things. If we don't get to your question, and that's happened sometimes because we have a lot of great questions coming in, what we're going to do is we'll work with Ken to get those questions answered, and then we'll post them on the website later on. Just wanted to take a moment here to talk about some upcoming TeamSTEPPS events. All of these events, including this webinar, are sponsored by the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. AHRQ funds all of this, and they provide it so that it's free for anybody who wants to attend. And so that's what's really wonderful about working on this and working with AHRQ. There are monthly webinars. We have them scheduled through August of this year, 2016. We put the topic, speakers, and registration information on the TeamSTEPPS portal website. You can register right now for next month's webinar. You can see here the topic, 5 hours in the PACU. Metro Health uses TeamSTEPPS to improve patient transfer from the OR to ICU. And that's going to be presented by Robert Smith and Joe Golub, both from Metro Health, which is one of the TeamSTEPPS regional training centers. That leads into the next topic on master training courses. We have 8 regional training centers around the country, and they provide master training courses where you can attend for 2 days, learn about the fundamentals of TeamSTEPPS, and also learn about how you'll go home and implement TeamSTEPPS. So it's a great program, free, and you can head over to teamsteppsportal.org to get the link to go register. We also have two other types of courses. They're advanced courses, and these are held at 2 of our regional training centers, the University of Washington in Seattle and Northwell Health, formerly the North Shore Long Island Jewish Health System, which is out on Long Island in New York State. And both of these sites are hosting advanced courses, and the focus of the advanced course is to take people who have already done a lot of great work with TeamSTEPPS in their institution and want to understand, A, how to connect TeamSTEPPS to other sorts of initiatives you might be doing in your hospital, be it HRO work, or work with the CUSP model, or work with Lean. So making those connections is one point. And the other real main point of the advanced course is understanding how to further spread TeamSTEPPS across your world. So if you're interested in those, there's something that you have to apply for. All of the information is on the TeamSTEPPSportal.org, and that application period for the first 2 courses is open for about a month more. We also have an annual conference every year. This year, it's in Washington, D.C., June 8th through 10th. Right now, registration is entirely filled up. There is a waiting list that you could sign up for, though. But it's very excited to have so many people be coming to the event this year. And hopefully there are people on this call who have already registered and are excited to attend. If it sounds like something you're interested in, throw your name on that waiting list, and maybe a spot will open up. So we do that waiting list on a rolling first come, first serve type basis. There's also, if you can't travel to a course, an online course that's available. And that TeamSTEPPS 2.0 Online Master Trainer course, if you go over to the URL that's on your screen right now, that is the URL you use to register for the online course. Of course, if you can't, you're not going to write it down right now, you miss it, we can get all that information to you. Really, information for all events is over at www.teamsteppsportal.org. So that is if you have a question about any of these different options, training, advanced training, future webinars, or the national conference. Again, if you need any help, we have a helpline that you can call. We also have a help email box. So this is for questions, both of logistical nature and also content nature. So any questions at all you have about the TeamSTEPPS world, that's where you head over to. That's not, though, of course, where we want you to send questions today on this webinar. Use that chat box that's over there on the right side. Just wanted to clarify for a second. All right, today's presenter, now I'm done speaking. Today's presenter is Ken Alexander, who's the Vice President of the Louisiana Hospital Association. And he also is with the Louisiana Hospital Association Research and Education Foundation, HEN. I've known Ken for many years now, before working on TeamSTEPPS, so I'm very excited to hear him present this webinar. He's a big advocate of TeamSTEPPS and of just quality improvement and patient safety work in healthcare world in general. And I want to give a big round of applause to him because, as many of you know, yesterday was the last day of the Mardi Gras season, and Ken being in Louisiana, he actually sacrificed and was in the office prepping for this webinar today on Fat Tuesday. So if that's not dedication to the cause, I don't know what is. So Ken, thanks very much for being here.
Chris, thank you very much for having me today. And as I look through and scroll through the chat box and everybody saying hi from where they are, I've got folks from all over Louisiana, so I'm not alone. And folks, and I'm proud of them for even showing up to work today, knowing what normally happens in South Louisiana and all over Louisiana during Mardi Gras. So as I also look at the chat, and what we're going to talk about today, obviously, is what you signed up for, is how to introduce TeamSTEPPS, but it's going to be in alternative environments. And I'm pleased to see on the chat box folks from North Miami Beach, from Indianapolis, from Madison, Wisconsin, from all over the country, small communities and large communities, because the title is almost a misnomer. I'm going to talk about our journey, and I'm going to talk about strategies to get hospitals interested in TeamSTEPPS that may not ordinarily be interested in TeamSTEPPS, whether they're a critical access, whether they're a rural, whether they're suburban, community, tertiary, it doesn't matter. What matters is getting them engaged and interested in learning the tools and using them to improve care and reduce harm. So as you see the objectives, that's what I just talked about. So, and along the way, what I want to do today is try to have a little fun. So I'm going to pretend that everyone is laughing at my jokes. I'm going to pretend that you're smiling and nobody's looking at a phone and nobody's checking email as we go through the webinar. Without further ado, when I do a presentation, and I do this presentation, you always try to open up with something a little wide. And so we're talking about team. And so, you know, I kind of make light everybody, and especially the facilities I'm in. They're all wearing multiple hats. Everybody's plowing the field the best they can. Their heads down, and they're plowing. So when I introduce team, and I introduce a definition of team, I give them this definition. 2 or more draft animals harnessed to the same vehicle or implement. And it seems to be pretty applicable. I wear a lot of hats here at LHA as well. And so it kind of it helps break the ice, make a little light, hopefully get a little chuckle because that's the intent. So, but what I want to do now is I'm going to come back to team, I'm going to talk about our journey. And I'm going to talk about kind of the timeline for Louisiana and TeamSTEPPS. So in 2010, prior to any of the Partnership for Patients work, which, remember, came out of the Affordable Care Act. I call that Don Berwick's Gift Back to Hospitals, where they carved out money to help us reduce harm and improve care in multiple areas of clinical areas. Before that, we partnered here in Louisiana with our QIO at the request of one of our member hospitals and systems to provide master trainer training. And I had never been introduced to TeamSTEPPS prior to that time, so I tagged along and actually became a master trainer. So then didn't really do anything with it, got some valuable skills and some valuable tools, but didn't carry that forward into any formal instruction of TeamSTEPPS. Then in 2011, as I've referenced, Partnership for Patients began, the hospital engagement networks, those contractors, we work with AHA and AHRQ, and along with 30 plus other states. And then we worked in the first round, in that first group, with about just under 100 hospitals total. 70, some odd of those were acutes. And so we chose TeamSTEPPS as one of the key tools to target culture change for us. And as I'll get into later, and in later slides, TeamSTEPPS encompasses so much, and whether it's one discrete tool or the whole enchilada, it's a great way, we think, here for hospitals, and hopefully you join in that thinking for hospitals and healthcare systems or any organization to be able to improve their communication and teamwork. We partnered with Tulane, who is one of the national training centers, Jenny Calzado and her crew there, and we're very successful in training 160 master trainers through the Hospital Association Research Education Foundation, HIN. So we're very, very proud of that fact, and we were able to present at one of the national conferences a couple of years ago with Jenny and Dr. Phil Boyson from the Ochsner system here on that journey. And so going through, we got trainers and trying to get them, but what you find is people go in the course and they feel that it's fairly overwhelming when they go, and that's some of the feedback. So we go through it, and in 2015, you're going to hear more about where the yellow brick road came into this. So continuing on the lessons learned, is the feedback was it was too much to swallow at one time. It said it felt overwhelming, and especially for those smaller rural and community hospitals where folks are wearing multiple hats, they're small teams, etc. And I get that. I mean, you look at it, and the binder is fairly intimidating. It is chock-a-block full of wonderful information and wonderful tools, but when you're thinking about how am I going to bring back that back to my hospital, how am I going to help my hospital embrace this entire concept, it was too much, and so you almost get paralyzed, is what I found in a lot of the hospitals, and unable to move it forward. And I would have hospital leadership asking me, as you see on screen, if there was some sort of a light version. And I'd kind of pondered that and didn't really go anywhere with it until last March. Last March, I was asked to develop a presentation on leveraging team productivity for a small national conference in New Orleans here in Louisiana. And so, okay, team, it had the word team in it, so of course I pulled out my TeamSTEPPS binder and saying, okay, let me find some talking points and some tips, and using how could I use those principles to speak to the concepts and principles of TeamSTEPPS, and kind of had an epiphany. That it works. It's if I can take TeamSTEPPS principles and if I can break it down into subsets and pick the core areas, introduce those core topics, and do it by giving hospitals basic high-level information, then I can kill two birds with one stone. So that presentation was successful. So I built on that presentation, and now I do it as basically an hour-long team building, teamwork. I get multiple uses out of it. But the point is, and I tell hospitals, you don't have to eat the elephant in one sitting. So the presentation that I'm going to go through with some of the slides that I use in the presentation and kind of describing the premise is how I explain the overarching foundations. I throw in examples of the TeamSTEPPS tools. I don't give everything. I don't give the whole package. I give snippets, and I give pieces of information to work. And so I find the ways to diffuse the feeling that the program's too complicated. And along the way, I try to make it entertaining and fun. And so there we go to kind of where the genesis of Follow the Yellow Brick Road came from. So now we're going to go into one of the slides that I use in the presentation that talks about an actual real definition of a team that I get from Washington University Business School. I got it on a Google search. A group of people with different skills and different tasks working together on a common project, service, or goal with a meshing of functions and mutual support. I do that to show you that I am versed enough in webinar ease to be able to read off of my own slides. So now that I've made that point, back to the presentation. When I was developing this, I said, okay, I don't want to use the true TeamSTEPPS example, so I want to diffuse it. I want to show them that you can apply this in any situation, any organization, any subset of an organization. It doesn't matter. Is it a hospital? Is it a car garage? Is it whatever it is? And so I went looking for the best example of a team I could find. And this is what I came up with, the Wizard of Oz. I mean, think about this. It is the perfect example of a team. Four very disparate people who have just met and they work together to meet goals. So you've got Dorothy Gale from Kansas. Dorothy Gale runs away from home, comes back with a tornado. The tornado takes the house up in the air, lands on the Wicked Witch in Munchkin Land, which is in the land of Oz. So then Dorothy's trying to get home. So Dorothy is told by Glinda the Good Witch, oh, follow the yellow brick road, go see the wizard, he'll get you home. So then we recap, she goes down and she meets the guy on the left, the Scarecrow. Now what does the Scarecrow want? The Scarecrow wants a brain. Along the way they meet and the team was born. Two people can be a team. They follow along the path, they meet the Tin Man, didn't know the Tin Man from anybody, and the Tin Man all of a sudden is part of the team because he wants to go to the wizard and get a heart. Along the way, they come along with the Lion who meets him on the path, tries to be really tough because he's wanting courage. That's my best Cowardly Lion impersonation. Thank you. I won't try to make you go through that again, but he wants courage. So here you have four people. A primary goal to get Dorothy home, secondary goals, and interim goals, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But it is the perfect example of a team that has nothing to do with healthcare, nothing to do with a hospital, but has a common thread that there are very few people in the United States who have not seen The Wizard of Oz. And when they are in the audience, I try to shame them till they go see the movie. Not really, but it is kind of fun to make fun of them when they go through. So, but there is, I had somebody say, really, is the movie about getting Dorothy home? I want to tell you that I really kind of think this movie is actually the ultimate chick flick with about two women trying to kill each other over shoes. So, I'm envisioning all of you laughing hysterically at that joke. I do use that slide in the presentation, but for the interest of time, I will move on. So, a not so funny slide, but a very good slide, and really the key critical slide is this one, the TeamSTEPPS slide. This is when I review TeamSTEPPS' origin and purpose. Now this audience, I'm assuming, knows that it started in the military, started in military hospitals, started in OR environments that were having drop balls and issues, and they developed all of these communication tools that we now know as the package of TeamSTEPPS. So it was easy to tie in Dorothy and the gang's achievements to TeamSTEPPS. You've got team principles of performance of a team, attitude of a team, the knowledge of a team, those 4 key skills of situation monitoring, mutual support, communication, and leadership. And then you've got the patient care team around it. Well, I just replaced the patient care team for Dorothy and the gang and going through. So that's the interplay, and that's what I use to introduce. And so what I'm going to do is review the goals, and then we're going to talk about how I go through each one of those areas and tie it in discreetly and by itself, and also say how TeamSTEPPS was actually applicable to Dorothy and the gang accomplishing their goals. So again, repeat the goals. Primary goal, get Dorothy home. Secondary goals, get the Scarecrow a brain, get the Tin Man a heart, get the Cowardly Lion courage, and then they go down the yellow brick road, they fight off the flying monkeys, they go to sleep in the poppy field, they get to the Emerald City, they finally get in, they get to see the wizard, and what does the wizard do? He sends them, before he will give them what they want to accomplish their goals, he sends them to get the broom, to get the witch's broom. So now we have our primary goal, get Dorothy home. Secondary goals, brain, heart, and courage. And an interim, a newly introduced interim primary goal of going to get the broom and bringing it back to the wizard. So that's an important piece because, as we know in hospitals, interim goals happen. Interim primary goals happen. We're marching down a path, something happens, especially if it's in a patient care area, in a highly acute area in ICU and OR, that sometimes the primary goals can effectively change and then come back to the original goal. So I felt that was important to show them how they were going to achieve that. So let's go through the foundation. Knowledge, attitude, and performance. Okay? Universal in application, the types of teams. If it works for them, it'll work for you. And then here's the brief introduction. We have knowledge. TeamSTEPPS model, right? The shared mental model. Are they on the same page? Well, yes, they were. Go find the wizard. Get Dorothy home. Get a heart, get a brain, get courage. And they use their collective knowledge. So all of a sudden, I have now introduced a TeamSTEPPS principle and a concept that can be applied universally in their organization or in any movie they want to pick and try to find when there's communication involved and more than one person working towards an end game or an end goal where they can find examples of how it plays to be a team. So we have knowledge. Go to attitude. Mutual trust. They believed in each other. Team orientation. All for one, one for all. So that works when you think about it. And here's in the movie and in our organizations, you have new staff that enter an organization. You have a new nurse, enters a med-surg unit. They assimilate and they instantly become part of the team, even though they don't know anybody from Adam's House Cat, right? And so it's the same thing. And then you need to trust that person and have their back. We'll talk about that when we get to mutual support. But the TeamSTEPPS goals of mutual trust and team orientation. Here you had Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, Cowardly Lion, all came together and instantly bonded, instantly trusted each other, and had the orientation and the singular goal of accomplishing the task that they had before them. So they had a great attitude. The 5 elements of performance. Adaptability. That's important in hospitals. For us, it was that interim goal shift at Wizard of Oz. Go get the broom. They had to adapt. They had to adapt along the way. If you think about the movie as we're discussing this or later, and I encourage you all to go back and watch the movie again, download it, whatever you need to do, and look at it with TeamSTEPPS in mind. Accuracy. Dorothy didn't just follow when there was a break in the road and a crossroads in the yellow brick road. She asked the Scarecrow for directions. She didn't guess. So there's an example of accuracy. Productivity. Every waking hour was spent trying to obtain the goal. Every waking hour that they were working on it. But here's the deal. And this is one thing I really try to express wherever, and I use this presentation not just to talk team steps, but to talk about teams, talk about goals, talk about accomplishing what we need to have. But we all get so busy and caught up in our work and in our life that we all sometimes need to take a big, deep breath. So when the wizard gave Dorothy and the gang the goal of the interim goal of getting the broom, what happened before they went out on that journey is they took a spa day. Remember, Dorothy got primped up, Cowardly Lion got a bow in his hair, the Scarecrow got new stuffing, etc., etc. So they took a little time for themselves, and I try to stress that we have to take care of ourselves and each other personally as well as professionally as we're moving through. And then continuing down the line, we've got efficiency about not wasting time and getting sidetracked, which outside of that little spa day, they were on task. And then safety, and have fun with that. We talk about patient safety in some of those areas. And then always kind of watch out for flying monkeys, and I put that in because I like the flying monkeys. They were one of my favorite kind of things. So moving forward, so then, now that we've done that, we can introduce the 4 elements. And as you know, and I know, but the hospitals I talk to don't always know that these 4 areas, situation monitoring, mutual support, communication, and leadership, are the key. They are the crux. They are the major tools in the book of the 5-inch binder that we know as TeamSTEPPS 2.0, right? And so I give examples going through of all of these areas. And so let's kind of go through them. Situation monitoring. If you notice, I'm using the TeamSTEPPS definition. And these slides are put into this TeamSTEPPS template, but these are slides that I use a different template on that are the exact slides I use in the presentations. And so the audiences that I present to see that the process of actively scanning and assessing situation elements to gain information and understanding, to maintain awareness, support team functioning, is the real TeamSTEPPS definition of situation monitoring. And we've introduced shared mental model, paying attention, cross-monitoring. I'll introduce sometimes cross-monitoring, paying attention to the other team members. Good example of that is kind of the duh thing, but when the Scarecrow catches on fire, oh, I noticed the Scarecrow's on fire. So the Tin Man, who just met him, by the way, and so he had his back and supported him, put the fire out. Scarecrow knew that Dorothy was hungry, figured out a way to get the trees to chunk apples so that Dorothy had something to eat, which seemed pretty smart for a guy who didn't think he had a brain. But I digress. The I'm safe checklist, and I don't introduce every single tool in all of these. Depending on the audience, depending on the situation, I may pick one, I may pick two, I may pick others. But I really focus on the fact that basically this is about assessing a situation. And then I remind audiences, especially clinical audiences, that this is no different than assessing a patient on a med-surg floor. If I'm addressing an engineering, folks with engineers in it, you assess the chiller to make sure the HVAC areas work well. That's the same thing, it's just in a different context, the same as situation monitoring in The Wizard of Oz was the same in principle, but different in practice. So as we go to mutual support, we've already talked about that. But when you talk about task assistance and feedback, advocacy and assertion, there are example after example after example. Once we give the definition here of mutual support in The Wizard of Oz. Oiling the Tin Man when he stiffens up. That's the picture you see on the slide in front of you. As they're oiling him to get him loose, he keeps leaning, and that's in the apple orchard tree right before the flying monkeys hit. When the Scarecrow supported the Tin Man supported the Scarecrow, and he put the fire out. So helping each other all during their journey. Feedback and making sure, and I take a little time with this one, and is because we, in the TeamSTEPPS tools, it's timely, it's respectful, it's specific, directed, and considerate, and in how we deal with each other. And then you see, and I'll find examples in the movie and say, even when they started to argue, somebody would defuse it. Oftentimes it was the Tin Man who, for somebody who didn't have a heart, kind of takes a heart to be able to diffuse conflict and redirect to the need and goal and encourage each other being respectful and considerate. The movie's talked of that. Advocacy and assertion. When the Cowardly Lion is too afraid to approach the wizard, what does Dorothy do? We will ask him for you. Okay? So all these examples that going forward. And so let's move on to communication. I love this area. okay? Because communication is universal. In leadership, how do we communicate? I don't know if you can see the slide well, but it's one of my favorite slides in the presentation, and it's the quote from the movie, how can you talk if you haven't a brain? Oh, some people without brains do an awful lot of talking. So I could go lots of places with that line, but I won't for interest of time here. But it's a great slide. And I spend most of my time in the presentation on this section and on leadership, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, and I find that the leadership in the hospitals, especially in small and rural hospitals, they find this area challenging. So by focusing some attention there, I'm addressing their needs and showing where TeamSTEPPS can be used very effectively to develop their teams and teach the needed skills. So I also talk about the Joint Commission research that was done that showed ineffective communication identified as a root cause for about 2/3 of reported sentinel events. I talk about effective communication and being complete and clear and brief and timely. I use the Wizards communication back to the gang as some examples of that. And then I talk about SBAR. And I talk about how even at the LHA in our HIN meetings here that we use SBAR. We use call-outs and checkbacks and all of those TeamSTEPPS-based tools. And so when I talk about SBAR, I said, who uses SBAR in your facility? And then usually they won't answer me, and because they don't know. And I say, do you ever talk to each other and say, this is what's going on, okay? This is why it's going on. This is why I think it's going on. And this is what I think we ought to do about it. Well, you've just had an SBAR exchange. You've addressed the situation, the background, you've assessed it, and you've made a recommendation. And they go, oh, yeah. Oh, I did just do that, right? So, again, effectively introducing TeamSTEPPS tools and addressing specific areas of need with communications, and also helping to reinforce these hospitals and these organizations that you're doing a lot of this already in your day-to-day life. So what you need to recognize is there's other skills and there's ways that you can expand that knowledge base and use it, and that's where TeamSTEPPS can come in and help you bring it together as a package. So as we move to that last area, leadership, and again, the ability to maximize the activities of team members and ensuring that team actions are understood and you can read the slide. So I give the definition there, and I talk about in effective team leaders, a brief checklist, how to address the wizard, how to rescue Dorothy, a huddle, okay? Before they got to the poppy field, they start wondering about the poppy field. They had a real brief huddle before that. Before they went in to see the wizard, they had a huddle. After they brought the broom, they had a debrief. So after Dorothy was rescued, they had a debrief. So, and this is especially important in stressing this in smaller organizations or organizations where people wear multiple hats and are on different teams. But actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, it could really be any size organization that's the case in, but I know we're focusing here on, with some focus on small and rural. How do you develop your staff and your team to be a leader? It's that fundamental need in all organizations, but you also find that in smaller organizations where you have to cultivate leadership more, you don't just hire it in. So it's there. So if you go through the gang, Dorothy was the obvious leader, but they all had times when they exhibited leadership, and that's extremely important to get across. And I spend a lot of time and effort in really focusing energy on that statement that everybody has skin in the game. Everybody is a leader. The Scarecrow was a leader when he helped with the apples to get Dorothy fed. The Tin Man, when he put the fire out, when Scarecrow first caught on fire, exhibited bravery and leadership. Okay? The Lion, well, the Lion was kind of a work in progress, but don't we have those folks that are works in progress in our organizations? But eventually he found his courage. I remember the quote by Omar Bradley, the great World War II general, said that the definition of bravery is the ability to act effectively even when scared, or do the right thing even when scared half to death. And so it's the same thing here, and it's the same thing in our organizations day in and day out. So then I come back to the line and saying he eventually found his courage, and courage is a key leadership trait. Even little Toto, cute little Toto, had to escape from the goons at the witch's castle and jump the moat and go up the hill and bring the three amigos to find Dorothy to rescue her from the witch, right? And now Glenda. People said, well, what about Glenda? I'm really not sure, but Glenda really looked cool floating around in that bubble, I'm just saying. And she kind of rocked the crown and the wand, but she did have positional leadership, and we'll talk about Glenda more in just a minute. So once I have all of that together, and I've given them all of this, and of course this takes about 40 minutes into this presentation at this point. So then I change gears, and I go to a more generic leadership play, okay? So in leadership, I use a couple of quotes, and this one I really like. Jim Collins wrote this book called Good to Great. It's a sales-oriented book, and he talks about leaders get the behavior they exhibit and they tolerate. Well, then I challenge them. Who has kids and who has seen yourself and your kids and gone, ooh, that is so me, and oh, I'm so sorry, right? So it's the better quote in the book. I'm sorry, I got myself sidetracked. The better quote in the book is the quote that says, "The enemy of great is good." The enemy of great is good. We can be good in leadership. We can be good at a team. We can be good at patient care. I remember David Fox from Illinois, who spoke at a conference when he had problems with his system and said, we have problems clinically. What's going to be our reduction rate for our errors? And somebody yelled out 95%. And he said, 95's great goal as long as the other 5% is your family member in the bed. And I use that quote all the time in this presentation and others because it tells a story. The goal is zero harm. The enemy of great is good, so we shouldn't settle for good when the ultimate goal is to be great. Okay? So, but then if all of that is still a little overly complicated, then what I do is I summarize it and I make it even simpler. I say, okay, effective teams, if you can't remember any of the stuff I just said, effective teams do 4 things really well, and they do it on, if you can remember this, they all start with the letter C. Effective teams commit to what they're going to do. They commit to each other. They commit to their goals. They collaborate. They work together. They find a system. They find a method. They they set their task forward, and they collaborate and work together to get there. They communicate fully, consummately, and completely to achieve those goals, and they never, ever pass up an opportunity to celebrate. I think about Dorothy and the gang skipping down the yellow brick road after they had fought off the flying monkeys. I think about ding dong, the witch is dead, that whole scene at the Emerald City and how beautiful that was, and how we all need to take a breath and take time to celebrate even the smallest of advances, the smallest accomplishments, and then ultimately and especially our big celebrations and our big accomplishments when we ultimately reach our primary goals. So, but I'll close my part of the presentation with some takeaways. If you find a way to engage a hospital and a staff in a way that takes them away from the actual clinical, that takes them away and gives them a frame of reference for something that they can easily grasp in their living room as well as they can in their operating room, they feel less intimidated. If you provide basic high-level concepts, you help pave a road for instruction of even more use of the TeamSTEPPS tools. Also find a way, TeamSTEPPS is the perfect platform and ladder to teach overall team, overall leadership skills in organizations of all sizes, shapes, and makeups. And then crafting a message to multiple purposes. Leadership development, as I just mentioned, setting a buildable foundation, and team building as well. But ultimately, it all comes down to the last slide in the presentation, where I give a quote from the movie that really says it all. And it says it about each of us. In all of those, I'm seeing holy majoli, there's 371 of you listening and hopefully paying attention to me right now. That when Glenda the Good Witch tells Dorothy at the end of the movie, you've always had the power, my dear. You've only had to learn it for yourself. We are all in the role and with the mission and with the privilege of working to improve the quality of human life. However we can help accomplish that, help our organizations accomplish that, it doesn't matter how we do it as long as we do it. So anyway, that concludes my part of this. I think we have some time for questions, so I will turn this back over to Chris. Chris, thank you.
Ken, that was great. That was absolutely a genius connection. So what a cool way you're using to roll this out.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that, looking through a lot of the questions that have come in, really do focus in on, how do you, even utilizing this particular model and something that really engages people and is shorter in time frame, how do you still, hook people when they have competing priorities?
Kind of meeting them where they are. I'll use personal examples. Everybody is pedaling the bike about as fast as they can pedal. And so, but we all wake up every day with the same goal. So find something, anything within the tools that fits and work on it.
Yeah.
Even if you have competing priorities, you can take, and we're going to introduce SBAR into our daily team meetings. We're going to introduce a huddle. We're going to do something. I say take one bite of the elephant, just one bite, and see how it works, and then take another bite, and then take another bite. And by doing that, regardless of competing priorities or how busy or how small, and hopefully what they've learned, Chris, is that the universality, if that's a word, of TeamSTEPPS works with multiple priorities. You had multiple goals going on at one time, multiple approaches, and so then you just really focus for them, helping them focus on what's one thing you can do today. What's that small test of change that you can implement that will make a difference?
That sounds good. Yeah, I think that is a very important lesson, the idea you're saying about eating the elephant one spoonful at a time. I know that a lot of people find out about TeamSTEPPS, want to jump right in, want to teach everybody everything, but it's really important to maybe look at a tool or two to address one situation and then have those kinds of wins and successes.
Agreed. And that's where, in each of the areas, the three foundations, the four elements, I'll try to discuss at least one tool and reference back. You'll find this in TeamSTEPPS. You'll find this used in TeamSTEPPS. This is, and then I'll, I didn't have without the luxury of time and telling the story here, I'll get audiences engaged and say, give me an example in the OR where this takes place. Give me something that you're doing now, and then if I can find a tie back to a TeamSTEPPS tool, I will. Saying, see there, you're already doing it. Now just kind of look at it and formalize it and see what else is there that can help enhance and improve on what you're already doing.
So what do you think is a great early tool that you see a lot of people starting off with, or an early problem that in your experience you've seen a lot of hospitals try to tackle initially?
It depends on the department, but oftentimes, hospitals most of the time are doing some sort of a huddle. That's the low-hanging fruit for me, huddles and SBARs. Because in some way, shape, or form they're doing it, and it's easy, and I don't mean the word manipulative in that sense, but it's easy for me to kind of take and massage what their version of their communication is and say, well, let's see how this ties to being to an SBAR. Let's see how this ties to this. Are you doing this? So
right.
Those are my two, if I have to pick two, those are my two go-tos. But then I'll talk in general. I'll talk about the attitude. I'll talk about mutual support as a general thing. Do you have each other's back? How do you treat orientees that are new to your department? And if you have issue, if you find that within your department, and especially when I'm talking to managers and leaders, or even just line employees, staff level employees, that if you're not assimilating somebody into your team very quickly, you're doing yourself and them a disservice. And so how can we use mutual support for that, and then kind of delve into that a little bit more?
Right. I think it's great that you're talking to them, to folks, about how the fact that they're likely doing some aspect of this already, that they are already, involved with maybe doing some sort of huddle, or they might be, having, the use of something like SBAR. And letting them know the other things like mutual support, things like, understanding what's going on around you and being situationally aware, and the tools that connect to that, they're really life skills that a lot of people probably use in their daily life. And, it almost seems too simple to use it when you're using it in your professional role, but that's all it is.
It truly is. Think of the Scarecrow. When you look at the Wizard of Oz and you look at the Scarecrow can be transposed into a hospital setting of someone who is very intuitive, very thoughtful, brings great information, and could very much be, has leadership qualities and skills, but they don't see it in themselves. And that's the point of the movie, right? Is self-discovery. That's a journey of self-discovery to a long way. And so just kind of the motivational part of this and where you pull TeamSTEPPS into this is helping them in that journey of self-discovery, saying, look at the Scarecrow. Who knows somebody in your organization that exhibits those type of personality traits? Or the person who is truly just basically insecure about where they are, but puts on that bravado, and we all know people like that in our lives, and that's the cowardly lion. So there are universal in application in how if you can use some organized fashion to bring all of those personalities together and make them effective and functional, then you've embraced TeamSTEPPS.
So when you're using this particular approach, does this really resonate with the physicians, surgeons in the groups that you're teaching?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, Chris.
Sorry. So does this really resonate also with somebody was asking if it resonated with the physicians as well, this approach, or do you recommend going to another approach?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
And this is where, and I don't mean to be flippant, but it's almost you have to look at your physicians overall. Are they the serious type? Will they respond to something that's a little lighter and maybe a little more fun? And I've had docs in this presentation, and it's been a mixed bag. I've had a couple of times where I did this presentation for not just exclusively the physicians, but the physicians didn't see the relevance or didn't grab as much of the intended kind of light, fair humor that it meant. So it may be that they need a little more formalized, okay, this is TeamSTEPPS, and they will respond better to the actual tools and where they are. And so at that point, then, this may not be the presentation for them, or it may not be the approach. You may need a little more formalized approach. But oftentimes, if you're going in, like on my side, I'm going into hospitals and working with them, I'll ask them about their medical staff and the personality of their medical staff or their medical staff leadership, and then work from there. But yes, it can very much. I mean, it's universal in its application, and if you have a medical staff that's geared for that presentation style and alternative thinking methodology, then yeah, I think it can work effectively.
Yeah, so I think the big lesson there is, to really consider your, locality and your audience. So it all comes down to knowing who you're going in to talk to.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So another person asked, they understand, that this is, a great model. TeamSTEPPS in general is a great model within an organization. But what are your thoughts about using TeamSTEPPS to solve inter-organizational problems? Do you know of any examples where there are separate entities that are, who need to come together and TeamSTEPPS is being used for that?
I don't know any examples in the field from where I've worked where you've got folks from outside, in a hospital environment, working together on a team. I could see the application from, especially as healthcare moves more towards population health, and you work more from that outpatient environment, working with readmission reduction. Actually, we're doing some things in Louisiana on readmissions to where we engage all the provider communities together And in some of those, if I took a little bit of time and reflected, I could find, I'm sure, lots of application and where TeamSTEPPS tools have just kind of been intuitively engaged in the process. And we do it in 10 locations around the state on readmission reduction. So I'm sure it could. I just haven't thought it in the hospital discrete specific things. I don't know of any, but I could try to do some research and find out.
Sure. Yeah, I think just a bit of advice on that, I think, would be, work internally and set up, what you want to do internally first. So if it's, you and your team want to use the brief huddle and debrief process, make sure everybody's comfortable internally, and then likely when you want to start using some of those tools to work with an outside partner and understand that, we're going to get together and talk and set our expectations to start. Either of us organizations can call a meeting, a huddle, to, if there's a change in expectations, and then when we come to the end, we're going to talk about what went well and what didn't go so well, and what are our moments of quality improvement. I think that if you go into it and you maybe don't say to the external organization, we do TeamSTEPPS, so you have to do TeamSTEPPS, you go at it more stealth-like, more like a TeamSTEPPS ninja.
Yeah, it is. And there's times when I will, depending on the organization, Chris, that I will reference teams. Like I said, I don't use the TeamSTEPPS slide template when I do this. And so I have the TeamSTEPPS slide that had the triangle with the elements and the foundation. But sometimes I'll slide TeamSTEPPS in. And I won't reference it every single slide, or I won't say the word TeamSTEPPS very much. And that's just, but I will say that, these tools are all available to you, and here's the program, and here's what it is. And so, again, that's kind of where I have to assess the audience and the group and who I'm talking to. So it works different ways. And when you talk about in outside organizations, I would think for some, what, working is, what we did in the first iteration of HIN when we sent teams to Tulane to train is we found hospitals that they had issues between the ER and Med-Surg. And so they put a team together of folks from those two departments, interdepartmental teams, to work on because they had issues communicating. I know I've spent I've been with the association for 8 years, but I spent most of my adult life inside of a hospital, and, shock and awe that the ER in the lab or the ER Med-Surg would have any kind of difficulty communicating, Right. I'm sure that that's a foreign concept to everybody that's listening in right now. So, yeah, but that's a very effective way to say, okay, so what are your teams made of? Are you just doing a Med-Surg team? Are you just doing an OR team? How about getting teams where you have disconnect or flow issues or efficiency or throughput issues or those type of things, and working together with those organizations and come together as a team and using the tools, which are probably, if you do, that's, you're going to find it much more effective.
Somebody else on here asked, Ken, that, they really are encouraged to do 4-hour teaching sessions for their clinical staff on TeamSTEPPS.
Okay.
And I think that 4 hours is something that I've heard is, you can get through all the fundamentals in 4 hours. And so this person's asking, is 4 hours really necessary? Can it be brought down to 2 hours and really focus on the meat, I guess, the fundamentals of TeamSTEPPS?
Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think you'd say possibly. It depends on what your situation is, right?
Exactly. I mean, for this is generally a 1-hour presentation that I give to organizations, and I've done it not just in a hospital. I've done it for professional groups. I've done it for groups of respiratory therapists. I've done it for groups of quality professionals from other places because it is very universal in application. And so it works to give kind of that introduction teaser. The
Right.
4 hours, I would think you'd have to be pretty judicious in what you wanted to pull out for those 4 hours, but could you do it? Sure. Could you find something in 2 hours? And in 1 hour, I found value in tools that I could at least introduce within that brief time frame. And I think if you have 2 hours, pick a few tools and expand on it.
Right.
You know, the resources that are available from you guys, from the TeamSTEPPS team, obviously has all of that and then some. So you could fill it up or some, but just kind of pick and do an assessment of who you're working with and for your teams to find out, okay, which of these tools are going to be the most meaningful for us to spend a little expanded time on to grow to whatever time you need it.
Right, and if you're going longer too, if you do spend that time, it doesn't need to be all at 4 hours at one sitting. You can break things up, and you know, it having a little bit more time allows maybe for, you know, doing some of the activities that go along with training. There are, you know, activities that help demonstrate the tools. The curriculum has this thing with paper chains, that you make a paper chain and, you know, doing these different iterations help you see how to use different tools. Our colleagues at the University of Washington in Seattle created a whole thing around Legos that they presented at the national conference, and that now is taught at some of the other regional training centers, where you use Legos to kind of understand what's going on with TeamSTEPPS. So yeah, I think like you're saying, kind of really depends on the situation and what tools you want to teach and what's important to you at that time and how you want to help people practice.
That's exactly right. And what's going to be meaningful and effective. And you can fill the time or take away time depending. I remember I also went to a follow-up to a more formal TeamSTEPPS Master Trainer training in Minnesota several years ago up there. And we did some of those types of exercises within our class in those 2 days. And so it was, you know, it's a great way then you build on that. The other piece is, you know, engaging the people in the room and engaging them and having them, okay, what's your issue, what's a question, what's a problem, what's a scenario, okay, of the information you've got in front of you, where do you think you could apply some of this? And then kind of flip it and then kind of go through some case studies on the fly. If you're comfortable enough with the material to be able to do that.
So this is a little change of direction. We'll make it our last question because we're almost at the top of the hour. But very more specifically, how can you see TeamSTEPPS be utilized to, I guess the person's asking how TeamSTEPPS can be implemented to avoid an employee being leaving early or maybe being removed early from their position. So I guess it goes to how do you think TeamSTEPPS could be used to improve not only employee performance, but to cut down on conflict and kind of raise that satisfaction? That's a big question, I know, to end with. Sorry.
That's okay, but that's a great question to end with, really, because it goes to the core of that word, whether it's a word or not, universality of TeamSTEPPS. Is when you think about the tools, you think about, you know, we go back, mutual support. What are the other, you know, I'm looking for my slide with the TeamSTEPPS triangle on it because I'm brain dead right at the moment. So in performance and the attitude and the knowledge of a team, you know, and you stress and you go to those tools that talk about a shared mental model. What is it about that employee or set of employees where they're not sharing the mental model, where they're not understanding the goal and the mission of the organization or the goal and the mission of the unit or the goal and the mission of the shift in question or the task at hand, and then start addressing that and looking at from that knowledge piece, and then one from the attitude. How's the rest of the team interacting with that employee? Is the rest of the team showing mutual support? Do they have each other's back? Are they helping to reinforce this is a shared mental model of where we're headed as a team? You're important to this aspect. How do you feel you're not important? So, and then in those elements of performance of safety and efficiency and adaptability, how is that person and how can you engage that person and then in leadership and finding something that would use their particular skill sets or finding a way to have a dialogue with them. to have a dialogue. So that would be kind of the brief, just off the cuff answer. I'm sure we could kind of flesh that out and answer that in a little more detail later.
No, that's great. Thanks, Ken. I mean, everybody needs to work together to fight the flying monkeys, right? So
that's exactly right. That is exactly right, Chris.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Ken, for incredibly entertaining but also very enlightening presentation today. I think people really loved it, and just thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and I hope that everybody out there had maybe a little bit of fun, laughed once or twice, as we all should do. I look forward to next month's presentation as a listener.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's teleconference, and you may now disconnect.